I remember the weight of the pen in my hand. I remember the way the paper felt under my fingers, smooth, official, cold. And I remember looking up from that document and seeing a 13-year-old girl sitting at the far end of a long table, a girl whose plate was still full, whose shoulders were so tight they might have shattered if anyone had touched her. She was trying very hard not to cry in front of people who would later say she had always been cold. That was the moment it all changed. Not with a bang, with a signature I didn't give. Let me back up that my parents were celebrating their anniversary. The whole family was there. My brother Daniel, his wife Vanessa, their daughter Madison, Daniel's daughter from his first marriage, Nora, and my fiancé, Mark. Everyone was dressed up. The crystal was out. The roast chicken smelled like every other anniversary dinner I'd ever sat through. Daniel stood up. He raised his glass. He made a little speech about family and sacrifice and how sometimes the people we love need us to step up. And then he said it. He was temporarily redirecting Nora's trust fund. The money her mother had left her. The money Rebecca had scraped together and saved and fought for, even when she was dying. Daniel needed that money to pay for his stepdaughter's private school tuition. And to keep his restaurant afloat. Temporarily, he said. Just until things turn around. Nora didn't cry. She didn't shout. She just said, very quietly, Mom left that money for me. And my mother said, don't be selfish. My father said she was ungrateful. Mark, my fiancé, pushed the authorization form across the table toward me, like he was doing me a favor, like my signature was already his, like saying yes was the only reasonable thing a reasonable person could do. I looked at that form. I looked at Nora. And then I did something I had never done before in my life. I said, no. The room went dead quiet. Daniel stared at me like I'd just spoken a foreign language. Mark laughed, a short, nervous sound, like he thought I was joking. No, I said again. I'm not signing this. I pulled out my phone. I took a picture of every single page of that document. Then I opened my banking app and canceled the automatic transfer I'd been sending Daniel every month for almost 4 years. The $2,000. The temporary help. The help that had never been temporary. Daniel's phone buzzed. He looked at it, and I watched the color drain from his face. You canceled the transfer, he said. Yes. You can't do that. It's my money. We have payroll this week. Then cut expenses. My mother stood up so fast her napkin fell to the floor. Claire Bennett, she said, her voice shaking. Don't you dare turn this into a scene. I looked around the table. At the people I had spent my entire life protecting. At my brother, who had never once protected me. At my fiancé, who had been discussing my lake house with Daniel behind my back, my house, my savings, my tolerance, like it was all just part of a plan. At my parents, who had always asked me to be the reasonable one, which meant the one who surrendered first. And then I took off my engagement ring. I slipped it into my purse. I think the scene started before I got here. I said it. I turned to Nora. Get your coat. She looked at me, this tiny, terrified girl in the oversized hoodie, and I saw something flicker in her eyes. Not hope. Not yet. Just confusion. Like she couldn't quite believe what she was hearing. Then my mother's voice rose behind me. Claire, don't you dare. But I was already walking. Mark followed me out into the driveway. He grabbed my arm. Claire, are you serious right now? You're humiliating everyone. I stopped. I looked at him. This man I'd planned to marry in 6 months, and I felt something that scared me more than anger. I felt clarity. What exactly did I do? I asked. You contradicted your brother. In front of his family. My family, too. You canceled money he depends on. My money. You dragged Nora into an adult dispute. She was already in it. It's her trust. Mark lowered his voice. You always do this. You get fixated on fairness. You make everything harder than it has to be. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I slid the ring off my finger, not as a dramatic gesture, just as a fact. Thinking with the ring on helps. I said, then I put it in my purse. I'll call you tomorrow. I told him. He stared at me. You'd better. Nora was already in the passenger seat when I got into the car. She was staring at her phone, pretending not to hear. But I knew she'd heard every word for 12 minutes, Neither of us spoke. I watched the dashboard clock. 12 minutes exactly. And then she said, "You're going to make me go back." It wasn't questioned. I kept my eyes on the road. "I don't know what the legal arrangement will be yet." She snorted. "Adults say that when they mean yes." I swallowed. "Okay, let me be more specific. You're staying with me tonight. Tomorrow, I'm calling the lawyer who handled your mother's estate. I'm going to find out exactly what your father tried to make me sign. And I'm not signing anything that moves your money unless I understand it and you understand it." She turned to look at me. "He's going to be mad." "I know. Grandma's going to be mad." "I know. Uncle Mark too." I almost corrected her. Then I realized she meant Mark. He wasn't my husband yet. He wasn't even my fiancé anymore. They aren't married yet. I said, "No," she said. "Is he mad?" "Probably." She was quiet for a long time. Then, very softly, she said, "Everyone gets mad when you say no." I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Yes," I said. "They do." "Then why do people say you can?" I didn't have a good answer. Not one that would sound like an adult trying to be profound. So I gave her the truth. "Because sometimes people teach you that you have a choice," I said, "and then punish you for using it." She looked at me for a second. "That's stupid." "It is." We drove the rest of the way in silence. That night, I gave her the second bedroom. Half office, half storage. A folded treadmill leaned against one wall. Fabric samples covered 3 shelves. Wedding invitation envelopes sat on the desk, unopened. She stood in the doorway and looked around. "Does it lock?" she asked. The question hit harder than anything that had happened at dinner. "Yes," I said. I showed her the lock. She tested it twice. Click. Open. Click. Opened. "Madison takes my laptop," she said, but I didn't move. "What?" She says, "Dad said we're supposed to share." "Do you?" "No." "Okay." "Vanessa says doors shouldn't be locked in families." I sat on the edge of the desk. "Do you want to lock this one?" She nodded. "Then lock it." She looked at me like I'd just handed her a passport. Later, after she'd showered and eaten 3 slices of pizza at midnight, I heard faint typing from the second room. I knocked.
Come in.
She was sitting cross-legged on the bed with an old laptop. The casing was cracked. One hinge was held together with black tape. "What are you working on?" I asked. She minimized the screen immediately. "Nothing." I almost said, "You don't have to hide things from me." But I stopped myself. Trust wasn't something I could demand, just because I had changed. She would decide when I'd earned it. "Okay," I said, and I meant it. That's where it started. Not with a grand speech or a dramatic rescue. It started with a locked door and a cracked laptop and a 13-year-old girl who had spent her entire life being told she was too difficult, too sensitive, too much. I didn't know then that Nora would go on to build one of the most successful cybersecurity companies in the world. I didn't know she'd be on magazine covers or that world leaders would ask for her advice. I didn't know any of that, but all I knew was that she was a child. And she deserved to have someone in her corner. So that's what I became. The next morning, I called Helen, the lawyer who had handled Rebecca's estate. I sent her photos of the document Daniel had tried to make me sign. I asked her about the prior digital authorization referenced in the fine print. Helen called me back within hours. "Claire," she said. Her voice was careful. "Do not sign anything else." "I wasn't planning to," I said. "Good. Tell me about the prior digital authorization." "I don't know yet. But here's what I do know. The preliminary packet your brother submitted to the trustee already includes a digital consent bearing your name." My blood went cold. "I didn't sign that." "I believe you." "Who submitted it?" "I'm finding out." I sat down in my kitchen and stared at the wall. The night before, I had noticed Mark's tablet still synced to my email. He'd left it at my apartment weeks ago. I had been using it to finalize wedding seating charts. The timestamp on the digital consent was 10:14 p.m. 6 days earlier. I knew exactly where I'd been at 10:14 p.m. I'd been at Mark's apartment. Using his tablet, I started taking screenshots. Over the next few weeks, I learned the truth about Nora's life. It was in the small things. Dental appointments that had been missed, school lunch accounts that had gone negative, clothes that were hand-me-downs from Madison, even though Madison was taller. Her mother's jewelry was in the garage somewhere. Her mother's photo albums were in storage because Vanessa said they made the house feel morbid. Daniel had been receiving survivor benefits on Nora's behalf. He'd been using them for household expenses and for Vanessa's car payments, for Madison's dance program, for kitchen remodels that had nothing to do with Nora. It wasn't all from Nora's accounts. But enough transfers moved through Daniel's general account to make the pattern ugly. I thought I would feel triumphant when I found out. I didn't. I felt sick. Because in my first life, the life before the anniversary dinner, I had believed Daniel. I had said things like, "You don't understand how expensive raising a child is," when Nora tried to explain what was happening. I had believed my own lies, but this time I was paying attention that Mark showed up at my apartment a few weeks later. He brought wine, my favorite, and walked in like we'd just been busy. Like nothing had happened. Nora was at a school coding club. "We need to fix this," he said. "What this?" I asked. "What broke?" He stared at me. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Make me spell out something obvious." "Try." He rubbed his jaw. "You've been distant. You moved your niece in without discussing it with me. You embarrassed me in front of your family. You took your ring off." I leaned against the kitchen counter. "I moved her in without discussing it with you." "Yes. We're getting married." "Were," I said. His face went stilled. "Don't say things you don't mean," he said. "I don't know what I mean yet exactly." "You're emotional." I almost laughed. What would a non-emotional response look like? "You calm down." Nora goes home. Daniel deals with the school issue. Helen stops threatening everyone with paperwork. We get back to planning the wedding. Helen hasn't threatened anyone. "You know what I mean." "No," I said. "I don't." He stepped closer. "Claire." I held up my hand. "Let me ask you something. Did Daniel ask you about using my lake property as collateral?" Mark froze. Just for a second. "But I saw it." "No," he said. "Too fast. Try again." "Why are you asking?" "Because I want an answer." This is getting paranoid. "Did he?" "No." I nodded. I walked to the hall closet, took out the velvet box, and placed it on the counter. He stared at it. "What is this?" A question. "If I stop giving Daniel money, would you still marry me?" He stared at me. "That's ridiculous." "Then answer." "If I never let him borrow against my house, if I never financially support my parents beyond what I choose voluntarily, would you still want to marry me?" He sputtered. "You're creating extremes. If Nora stays with me for the foreseeable future, now you're being unfair." I looked at the ring. He did too. "We didn't agree to raise a teenager," he said. "I'm not asking you to. You're asking me to build a marriage around your brother's family drama."
"No."
"I'm asking whether my boundaries change your decision." He dragged both hands through his hair. "I love you, but I need you to act differently. The version of you I love doesn't say no this often." "Then tell me why you knew about the trust before I did." His mouth tightened. "Daniel mentioned it." "Why, we talk about finances." "No, my finances. My property. His loans." "Why?" "Because I'm in real estate. I know lenders." I stared at him. "Did you help them find financing?" Mark looked away. "It was preliminary." "Did you co-sign anything?" Silence. My heartbeat slowed. I knew what was coming. In my first life, I hadn't asked this question. I hadn't wanted to know. "Mark," I said. "How much?" He finally said it. "A short-term bridge note." "How much?" "It's not a big deal." "How much?" 300. 300 what? Thousand. I stared at him. $300,000. It's secured by business assets. The failing restaurant. It's not failing. Then why does he need Nora's trust? He had no answer. I looked at him, the man I had planned to marry in 6 months, and I saw something I had never seen before. I saw a man who had been making plans with my brother. Plans about my money, my house, my tolerance. Mark picked up the ring box. "Put this away." I didn't move. "Claire," he said. "Don't do this." "No," I said. He stared at me. I realized in that moment that he had never truly believed I could leave him. Not because he thought our love was unbreakable, but because my entire personality had been built around staying. "I'm canceling the wedding," I said. His face went blank.
"No."
"Yes." "You're not thinking." "I've never thought more clearly." "Over your niece."
No."
"Over me." He pushed the ring box toward me. Take a few days. I've had years.
He stared at me for a long time.
Then he said something I would remember for the rest of my life. You're choosing a difficult child over your future. I opened the front door.
No.
I'm choosing a future where people don't get rewarded for calling someone difficult, when what they really mean is inconvenient. He left an hour later. Nora came home. She looked at the untouched wine, then at my bare hand. You broke up, she said. Yes. Because of me.
No.
She stared at me. I crouched down so we were eye level. Listen carefully, I said. You are not responsible for my relationship. But he didn't want me here. That told me something about him. If you weren't here, I would still need to know that. Her eyes filled with tears. She looked furious about it. Adults always say kids aren't responsible, she said. But then they act like we ruin things. I know. So how do I know? I took a breath. Because I will keep telling you until my actions match it. Long enough that you believe me. She wiped her face with her sleeve. That's a weird answer. It's the best one I have. That night, after Nora went to bed, I opened Mark's tablet. He had forgotten it months ago. I should have logged out of his accounts. Instead, I stared at the synced mail notification on the screen. Daniel Bennett. Lake property. My pulse jumped. I opened the message. Then another. Then an entire chain. Claire will come around. Mark had written. She always does. Need the trust piece first, Daniel had replied. If we can show liquidity, lender will extend. After that, I can get her comfortable with the lake place as temporary collateral, Mark wrote. She'll fight, Daniel said. If you call it collateral. Then I won't. My hands went numb. There were more messages.
Months of them.
Discussing my house, my savings, my tolerance. Me, not as a person but as a sequence of predictable permissions. I took screenshots. I forwarded the thread to Helen. I changed every shared password I had. I deleted Mark's access from my cloud accounts, and then I sat in the dark and cried. Not because I was sad, because I was finally furious enough to stay that way. The next morning, I bought Nora a new laptop. She stared at the box. I can't take this. You need it. It's expensive. Yes. She looked at me. What's the catch? There isn't one. There's always one. I thought about my family. Then I said, then this can be your first example that there doesn't have to be. She opened the box slowly. 2 hours later, I walked past her room and saw something on the screen. Lines of code, a diagram, a small handwritten note taped beside the keyboard. Try again, but smaller. I didn't know then that the project on that laptop would eventually become the first architecture sketch for a company worth billions. I didn't know Nora's name would one day be in airports. I didn't know any of that. All I knew was that she looked peaceful, and for the first time in either of my lives, I understood that protecting someone's future didn't mean controlling it. Sometimes it meant giving them a door and letting them lock it. The legal battle took 11 months. 11 months of emails and forms and appointments and receipts. 11 months of Rachel Marino, the guardian ad litem, asking questions that made everyone uncomfortable. 11 months of Daniel's lawyer arguing that I had created conflict where none existed, and Helen responding with records, the attempted trust authorization, the digital consent under my name, the school dispute, the voluntary guardianship Daniel had signed, the medical appointment history, the survivor benefit records. Nothing alone proved Daniel was a monster. That wasn't our argument. Our argument was simpler. Nora needed stability. And Daniel had repeatedly treated her financial resources as available family property. The court agreed. The judge maintained the guardianship. An independent fiduciary took over the trust administration until Nora turned 18. Daniel retained parental rights, but my household was Nora's primary home. Daniel was furious. You wanted this, he shouted at me outside the courthouse. This is what you wanted. Strangers looking through my finances. You filed the petition, I said, because you took my daughter. You signed the guardianship for school convenience. You told me to keep her because you were tired of arguing. I never said that. I pulled out my phone. I opened a text. His text. Maybe having her with you for a semester will calm everything down. You cover costs. I'll sign school form. Daniel stared at the screen. You save everything now. Yes. You've changed. Yes. He said it like an accusation. I accepted it like a compliment. The hardest part wasn't the legal battle. The hardest part was Nora. For months, she waited for me to change back. If I was stressed, she cleaned the entire kitchen. If I had a difficult week at work, she stopped asking for rides. When I mentioned legal fees, she offered to return the laptop I had to teach her, over and over, that she wasn't responsible for my feelings. That she didn't owe me for needing things. That being a child wasn't a debt. You do not solve other people's bad behavior by making yourself smaller, I told her one night. She looked at me for a long time. Is that what you did? She asked. The question was so accurate I laughed. Yes, I said. With Dad. With Grandma. With Mark. With everyone. Did it work? No. She nodded slowly. Okay. She kept the laptop by spring. Nora's relay shield project, the one she'd built on the old cracked computer, had evolved. Mr. Clean, the computer lab teacher who had never stopped believing in her, helped her enter a national youth competition. She placed second. My mother saw the article.
She called.
Hi, Claire, she said. Her voice was careful. I saw Nora's picture. She looks older. She is. Your father misses her. She has a phone. You know she won't answer us.
Yes.
That's because of you. There it was. My old life would have collapsed around that accusation. The new one barely moved. I don't control who Nora answers, I said. You influence her. Of course I do. All adults influence children. Then use that influence responsibly. Define responsibly. Remind her that family is permanent.
No.
My mother inhaled. Claire. Family relationships can end. I said, that's a terrible thing to teach a child. So is teaching her she has to accept anything because someone shares her DNA. My mother started crying. We are not monsters. I never said you were. Then why are you punishing us? I'm not. I gave her a room. Silence. A long one. Then my mother said, you always wanted to be the good one. That hurt. Because maybe some part of me had. Maybe rescuing Nora had made me feel less guilty about the person I'd been before the rebirth. Maybe I needed to believe I could correct something. But motives could be mixed without changing boundaries. I don't need to be good, I said. I need to stop doing things I know are wrong. She hung up. At the final guardianship hearing, Daniel wore a navy suit. Vanessa sat behind him. My parents sat one row back. Mark wasn't there. He had provided documents through counsel, correspondence related to Daniel's financing, that I read the emails the night before. Seeing them in legal format was different. Exhibit 17, 18, 19. Words that had once made me feel small now had page numbers. Mark, she always comes around. Daniel had written, she'll sign. If Mom pushes, Mark, Lake Place could solve the rest. Daniel, don't say mortgage. Mark, obviously. I had cried when I first found those emails. At the hearing, I felt almost nothing. That was healing too. Not forgiveness. Distance. Rachel Marino submitted her report. She recommended that Nora remain with me through majority unless circumstances materially changed. She recommended independent trust management. She recommended structured voluntary family contact rather than forced reunification. Daniel's attorney objected to the characterization of the financial history. The judge asked Daniel why he had tried to obtain a related party loan from his daughter's educational trust. Daniel said it would have benefited the household. The judge asked whether Nora had agreed. Daniel said she was 13. The judge asked again. Did she agree? No. Daniel admitted. The judge asked why Claire's digital authorization had been submitted before she signed the final documents. Daniel blamed an accountant. The accountant's declaration said Daniel had provided the file. No one shouted. No one gasped. Reality didn't need dramatic music. Sometimes it only needed follow-up questions. Then Nora was allowed to speak. Not as a witness, but as a teenager whose preference mattered. She sat at the small table beside Rachel. Daniel looked at her. His face softened in a way I had once found convincing. Nora, he said. The judge stopped him. Mr. Bennett. He looked down. The judge asked Nora, Where do you want to live? With my aunt. Why, because I know what the rules are there. The judge waited, and Nora continued. At Dad's house, rules changed depending on what Madison needed. At Aunt Claire's, if she says something is mine, it's mine. The judge nodded. Do you want contact with your father? Nora looked at Daniel. I held my breath. Not right now, she said. Daniel's face collapsed. I love you, he said. The judge warned him again, and Nora looked down. Then she said very quietly, You always say that when somebody is making you stop. The room went still. Daniel closed his eyes. I didn't feel victorious. He was my brother. I remembered us as children, building forts under the dining table. Him carrying my backpack when I broke my wrist. Me driving 3 hours to help him move into college. People rarely became only one thing. That was why leaving them could hurt even when it was right. The court maintained the guardianship. An independent fiduciary took over the trust. Daniel retained parental rights, but Claire's household remained Nora's primary home. No one was destroyed. No one went to prison. There was just a boundary. Daniel could no longer talk his way around outside the courthouse. My father came toward me. You got what you wanted, he said. She's gone. I said. He looked at me.
What?
She was already gone. You just didn't notice because she was still sitting at your table. He looked away. 3 years later, Nora graduated high school. Daniel came.
My parents came.
I didn't invite them. The school had mailed standard notices, and they showed up anyway. Nora saw them in the auditorium. She froze. Do you want to leave? I asked. No. Do you want me to ask them to? She considered it. Then she shook her head. I want my diploma. So we stayed. Nora graduated near the top of her class. She won a national cybersecurity scholarship and a full academic package from a university on the East Coast. When her name was called, Mr. Clean stood before anyone else did. I stood next. Daniel stood too. Nora didn't look at him. Afterward, my mother approached with flowers. Nora accepted them politely. Thank you, she said. My mother cried. You've become such a beautiful young woman. Nora nodded. My father said, We're proud of you. Nora looked at him. For what? He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Daniel stepped forward. Can we have 5 minutes? Nora looked at me. I didn't answer for her. She took a breath.
No. His face tightened.
Nora, I'm 18 next month. I know. Then listen. He went still. I don't want a relationship right now, Nora said. I'm your father. That was a relationship you kept using as a receipt. Daniel flinched. You kept showing it whenever you thought it entitled you to something, Nora continued. If I ever change my mind, I'll contact you. Daniel's eyes filled. I almost broke. Not because I wanted her to forgive him. Because there is no clean joy in watching a child become strong enough to say something she should never have needed to say. A month later, Nora turned 18. Helen arranged the final transition meeting. The independent trustee reviewed everything: statements, balances, investment records. Rebecca's original instructions. Nora signed for control over what legally transferred at majority. She looked at me. You never used any of it.
No.
You could have been reimbursed. Probably. Why didn't you? I smiled. Because I knew this conversation would happen. What conversation? The one where you wondered if I expected something. She stared at me. Do you know? Nothing. Call me sometimes. She rolled her eyes. That's not money.
Exactly.
She left for college 6 weeks later. I cried in the parking lot. Then I went home to an empty apartment for the first time in years. No one needed me. I thought that would feel peaceful. Instead, it terrified me. I had built my identity around usefulness. Family emergencies, wedding planning, Daniel's bills, Nora's school forms, court filings, crisis management. I didn't know what to do with an ordinary Tuesday. So I learned slowly. I took pottery classes. I stopped checking my mother's social media. I sold the giant dining table I never used. I renovated the lake house with my own savings. I dated twice. Stopped twice. Not because the men were terrible, but because I no longer believed every relationship had to become permanent to be worthwhile. Nora called every Sunday. Then every other Sunday. Then irregularly because college became busy. I let that happen too. Loving someone wasn't the same as demanding access. She interned at 2 cybersecurity firms. Turned down one major employer. Started a small research collective with 3 classmates. Changed its name twice. 22. She called me at 2:13 a.m. I think I'm dropping out, she said. I sat up. Are you failing? No. Pregnant, Anne Claire. Just narrowing options. She laughed.
No.
Crime? No. Then why? We built something. What kind of something? She talked for 20 minutes. I understood maybe 30%. Distributed identity validation. Enterprise security architecture. Adaptive authentication. Zero trust infrastructure. Is it legal? I asked. Yes. Do you have enough money to eat? Barely. Need a loan? Silence. Then, maybe. How much? 10,000. I sent it the next morning. Not from her trust. From me. We signed a simple promissory note because she insisted. She paid me back 14 months later with interest. I framed the check. Not because it was worth much, but because it was the only money she ever owed me. Years passed. Her company changed names again. Aegis Systems. At first, I saw it in niche technology articles. Then financial publications. Then mainstream news. A government contract. A major acquisition. International expansion. Nora's face began appearing in airports one afternoon. Walking through a terminal in Chicago, I stopped under a 40-foot advertisement. Global Technology Summit keynote speaker. Nora Bennett. Founder and CEO, Aegis Systems. She was 27. Hair shorter. Suit immaculate. Expression calm. Under her name were 3 words. Security. Infrastructure. Trust. I laughed so hard a stranger looked at me. Then my phone rang. My mother. For the first time in 9 years. I knew exactly why. They had finally learned who Nora became. Not from me. From the world. I let it go to voicemail. Then my father's. Then Daniel's. That last one surprised me. He hadn't called my number directly in almost 4 years. My phone buzzed again. And Nora, did I answer? You're famous in an airport. I said. She groaned. You saw it. It's the size of a building. They didn't tell me it would be that big. They made your head 8 feet tall. That's horrifying. I smiled. Your grandparents are calling. Silence. Then, already. Apparently. Daniel's call came again. Nora exhaled. I knew this would happen, she said. Do you want me to block them? They'll find other channels. True. Another pause. Then, do you remember when Dad said, maybe I'd fix computers? I laughed. Yes. I almost sent him the billboard. Don't. I know. You're allowed to think it. I know. That was the difference. Nora no longer needed permission to feel angry. She only needed freedom to decide what to do with it. What do you want? I asked. Nothing. Then do nothing. You make that sound easy. It took me an entire lifetime to learn. She didn't know how literal that was. My mother left a voicemail. Claire, we saw the news. We had no idea. Of course they hadn't. That was the point. Your father and I are so proud. Whatever happened before, surely this is a moment for family to come together. I deleted it. My father sent a text. Please tell Nora we would like to congratulate her personally. I forwarded it to Nora without commentary. She replied, No, thank you. I sent exactly that. Daniel was less subtle. We need to talk. I wrote back, about what? My daughter. Then contact her directly. She blocked me. Then you have your answer. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Return. You kept her from me for years. That accusation could still reach inside me. Not anymore, I replied. The last time I made a decision about your access to Nora, she was a minor. She has been an adult for 9 years. No response. 2 weeks later, Helen called. She was semi-retired now. Still sharp. You're going to enjoy this less than I am, she said. What happened? Daniel retained counsel. He's exploring whether he has any claim connected to Nora's early company formation. I laughed. Actually laughed. On what basis? I asked. Parental contribution. Early living expenses. Equipment. Possibly intellectual property created while she was a minor. Her first laptop was mine. He didn't pay for college. He used her money. I know. Is there any real claim? No. Then why entertain it? because some lawyers charge by the hour. Daniel's attorneys sent a letter to Aegis Systems. Aegis had its own legal department, a very large one. Their response was 3 pages.
Polite.
Clinical. Final. Nora sent me a copy. At the bottom, she wrote, "Apparently I inherited Dad's confidence, but not his legal theory." I texted back, "Use your powers for good." The story might have ended there. It didn't, because money does something strange to people who believe relationships are investments. My parents began appearing in interviews for local publications. Nothing dramatic. They didn't insult Nora. That would have looked bad. Instead, they talked about how brilliant she'd always been, how the family had encouraged her curiosity, how Daniel had worked hard as a single father after tragedy. Nora sent me one article. I read 3 paragraphs and stopped. "Do you want to respond?" I asked. "No." "You sure?" "Yes." 6 months later, Aegis announced a massive infrastructure partnership across Europe and North America. Financial media began using words like empire, powerhouse, dominant platform. Nora hated the word mogul, which naturally meant everyone used it. Global cyber security mogul Nora Bennett expands Aegis network. Self-made tech mogul. Trillion-dollar architect of digital trust. My mother called again. This time I answered. She was crying. "Claire, what happened?" "Nothing happened." "Then why are you crying?" "I saw her interview." "Okay." She mentioned Rebecca. She didn't mention us. "What do you want me to say? We're her grandparents." "Yes. We loved her." I waited. My mother became angry. "We did." "I didn't say you didn't." "Then why are you acting like we abused her?" "I never used that word." "You always do this. You make us sound terrible by staying calm." That almost made me smile. "What do you want?" I asked. "I want my granddaughter back." "She isn't mine to give you." "Talk to her." "Claire."
No.
"After everything we did for you." There it was. The invoice. I had spent my first life paying invoices no one else could see.
Birth. School.
Family vacations. Help with rent. Parents' approval. Daniel's childhood kindness. Mark's proposal. Every relationship came with accumulated debt. The second life began when I stopped accepting the statements, "I love you," I said. My mother went silent.
He continued.
"But loving you doesn't give me the right to pressure Nora for you." She cried harder. "You've changed so much." "I know. I barely know you. Maybe you mostly knew what I would do for you." She hung up. A month later, Mark contacted me. Not by text. Email. Subject: "Congratulations." I almost deleted it. Then Curiosity one. "Claire, saw the profile on Nora. Incredible. You were right about her. I hope you're doing well. I've thought a lot about how things ended. We were both under enormous pressure, and I regret the way I handled Daniel's financing situation. If you'd ever like coffee, I'd be glad to see you." I stared at one sentence. You were right about her. That was the misunderstanding. I hadn't been right about a stock. I hadn't selected a winner. I hadn't broken my engagement because I knew Nora would become rich. I replied, "Mark, I was not right about what Nora would become. I was right that what happened to her was wrong. Those are different things. I wish you well." He answered within an hour. "I understand. I just meant you made a smart choice." There it was again. Choice as investment. Nora had become proof that I had made a profitable bet. I deleted the email. 3 months later, Aegis launched the Rebecca Bennett Initiative, a foundation providing secure devices, technology education, and legal resource grants to teenagers in unstable family situations. Nora invited me to the launch. "Do I have to speak?" I asked. "No."
"Please." "No."
"I'm serious." She laughed. "You stood up to Grandma. But a microphone scares you. Your grandmother couldn't be clipped and uploaded." Fair. The event was held in a modern glass building overlooking a river. Journalists, educators, engineers, non-profit leaders. Nora stood backstage in a black suit and sneakers. "Some things never changed." She adjusted my name badge. "You okay?" "No." "Good." "Why good?" "Means you're not planning to make it weird. I can still leave." She grabbed my wrist for 1 second. She was 13 again. Then she let go. Stay. So I did. Nora walked onto the stage. Applause filled the room. She waited until it stopped. My mother believed that choices matter most when people have the freedom to make them. She began. A photograph of Rebecca appeared behind her. My throat tightened. She tried to build that freedom for me before she died. Nora continued. She talked about access, technology, education, legal literacy. Then she paused. When I was 13, I nearly lost the resources my mother left me. The room quieted. I also nearly lost something harder to measure. Another slide appeared. Not my picture.
A door.
Simple.
White.
With a cheap brass lock. I knew it instantly. The second bedroom in my old apartment. Nora looked toward me. Privacy, she said. A few people smiled. I lived in a house where my room wasn't really mine, Nora continued. My work wasn't always treated as mine. My future was discussed as if it belonged to everyone who shared my last name. My hand shook. Then my aunt gave me a room with a lock. The room went completely silent. That sounds small, she said. It wasn't. She looked directly at me. Claire did not teach me to build a company. She taught me that no one was entitled to open every door just because they called themselves family. I covered my mouth. Nora continued. People now ask if she always knew I would become successful. Soft laughter. She didn't. More laughter. I was 14. I wore hoodies 3 sizes too big and once crashed her Wi-Fi for 6 hours. I laughed through tears. She loved me when I had nothing anyone wanted. The sentence hit the room differently. I knew it would be quoted.
It was.
But in that moment, it belonged only to us afterward. Reporters asked about our family. Nora declined. One persisted. Do you have a relationship with your father now?
No.
Would you consider reconciliation? Nora smiled politely. Reconciliation is not a public obligation. That was the entire answer. Daniel watched the clip. I knew because he sent me a message that night. Tell her I'm sorry. I stared at it. Then I wrote, tell her yourself if she ever opens that door. He replied, she won't. I looked at the screen for once. I didn't soften reality for him. No, I wrote. She may not. My parents eventually stopped calling every week. Then every month. I saw them twice a year. Neutral restaurants. Short meals. No money requests. No messages sent through me to Nora. Those were my conditions. They didn't like them. They accepted them. Daniel and Vanessa divorced. Not because of Nora. Because debt and blame have a long half-life. Madison eventually sent Nora an apology. A real one. No request attached. No demand for forgiveness. Nora didn't respond for 6 months. Then she sent, I received this. Thank you for acknowledging it. That was all. I thought it was generous. Mark married someone else. His real estate career recovered. Daniel's restaurant closed. He eventually found a salaried operations job.
No spectacular destruction.
That mattered to me. I didn't need anyone ruined. I needed them unable to use me. There is a difference. At 51, I still worked. Not because I had to, because I liked my work. I became a partner in my firm, then reduced my hours. I kept the lake house. I never sold it to Aegis. I never let Nora buy me a mansion. She tried once. I said no. She bought me a coffee machine instead. I accepted compromise, she said, manipulation. Healthy negotiation. You're impossible. Runs in the family. We both went quiet, then laughed. The lake house became our place. No security team inside. No board meetings.
No interviews.
Nora kept an old sweatshirt there. I kept pancake, mixed one autumn morning, years after the foundation launch. She arrived before sunrise. No driver. No assistant. Just Nora. She walked into the kitchen, dropped her bag, and opened the refrigerator. You have no eggs, she said. Good morning to you too. How do you survive? Global cybersecurity infrastructure apparently doesn't include grocery delivery. She rolled her eyes and I watched her move around the kitchen. 31 years old now. Founder.
Eso.
Board chair. A woman governments called when infrastructure failed. A woman magazines described using numbers I couldn't emotionally process, but I remembered 13. Dry cereal in a coffee mug. Asking if she had to go home. Asking if a bedroom door locked as she turned. Why are you staring? No reason. That's creepy. Eat your cereal. She found the box. Poured it into a mug. I laughed as she looked down. Then laughed too. We ate on the porch while the lake turned silver, and after a while, Nora said, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you signed? I did more than she knew in one life. I had signed." In one life, she still became extraordinary. But she became extraordinary with scars I had helped create, and I could never tell her that. So I answered the question I could. Yes, I said. What do you think? I think you still would have found a way. She looked at me. That's not fair. Would I assent? You always make it sound like I saved myself. You did. You helped. I opened a door. You changed your entire life. I gave you a room, Aunt Claire. I protected some money. I signed some paperwork. I showed up. That's a lot. It should have been normal. She looked toward the lake. Maybe, she said. We sat in silence. Then she said, Dad emailed again. My chest tightened slightly. What did you do? Nothing. Okay. He says he doesn't want money. Maybe he doesn't. He says he just wants to know me. I waited. She turned to me. Aren't you going to tell me what to do?
No.
She smiled faintly. You never do. Not anymore. She looked back at the water. I might answer one day. Okay. Or I might not. Okay. You'd be fine either way. Yes. She nodded. That was the life Rebecca wanted for her. Not wealth. Not power. Choice. That I spent my first life believing love meant giving people what they asked from me. Money, time, silence, forgiveness, another chance, another signature, another piece. That in my second life, I learned something harder, that love sometimes looked like refusal. No, you cannot take her money. No, you cannot use my house. No, I will not repair a relationship you keep breaking. No, being family does not grant unlimited access. No, forgiveness is not the price of peace. And sometimes love looked like something even simpler. A room, a laptop, a ride to school, a lawyer's phone number, a saved bank record, a locked door. Years later, people would look at Nora's company and call me lucky. Some even called me visionary. They imagined I had somehow seen the future, that I had recognized a hidden genius and made a brilliant long-term bet. They were wrong, that I did know the future. But that was not why I chose her. I chose her at a dinner table where everyone else had already calculated what she was worth to them. I chose her when protecting her cost me money, my engagement, my parents' approval, my brother, the version of myself that survived by being useful. That I chose her when there was no audience, no company, no billion-dollar valuation, no foundation, no headlines, just a 13-year-old girl at the far end of a table trying not to cry while adults discussed taking something her dead mother had left her. That was the only moment that mattered. Everything else came later. The world eventually learned Nora Bennett's name. My family learned it from the news that I had known her all along. Not as a mogul, not as a prodigy, not as proof that I had made the right choice. As my niece thought, and this time, that was enough.